The bright morning sun reflected off the glass walls of one of the largest corporate headquarters in the city as a rusty blue pickup truck slowly rolled into the executive parking lot. It looked completely out of place among the luxury sedans, imported SUVs, and black company vehicles worth more than some people's homes. What happened next would become the most talked about event in the company's history. A wealthy CEO looked out her office window, saw the old truck, and ordered it to be towed immediately. Exactly 1 hour later, the same CEO sat frozen in a boardroom while every member of her board desperately begged the truck's owner to stay and talk. Before we begin, if you believe kindness matters more than appearances and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire for more powerful stories that touch the heart. The truck belonged to a 38-year-old single father named Grayson Hale. Grayson was the kind of man most people overlooked. His jeans were usually faded. His boots showed years of wear. His hands carried permanent marks from hard labor. He lived in a modest rental house on the edge of town with his 10-year-old daughter, Piper. 5 years earlier, Grayson's world had collapsed when his wife passed away unexpectedly from a sudden illness. The loss nearly destroyed him. There were days he barely found the strength to get out of bed. Nights when he sat alone at the kitchen table after Piper had fallen asleep, wondering how he would survive another day. But every morning, his daughter needed breakfast. Every afternoon, she needed help with homework. Every evening, she needed a father who refused to quit. So Grayson kept going. He worked multiple jobs. He repaired machinery. He consulted for small manufacturing companies. He fixed broken equipment that others considered beyond repair. Slowly, he built a reputation among factory owners and engineers. What almost nobody knew was that Grayson possessed one of the most brilliant mechanical minds in the industry. He never bragged. He never advertised. He simply solved problems. Years earlier, he had quietly developed a revolutionary industrial efficiency system that significantly reduced manufacturing costs. Rather than creating a public company, he licensed the technology privately and accumulated substantial wealth. Yet he never changed his lifestyle. The old truck remained. The small house remained. The humble clothing remained. His daughter remained his entire world. On that particular morning, Grayson had been invited to meet the board of Titan Dynamics, a billion-dollar corporation struggling with massive operational losses. The company had spent years trying to solve production issues that were costing millions every month. After hearing about Grayson's reputation through several industry contacts, a few board members convinced the company to invite him for a consultation. Unfortunately, CEO Victoria Langston had not been informed about who Grayson was. Victoria was 46 years old, highly intelligent, fiercely ambitious, and accustomed to judging situations quickly. Her rise to power had been remarkable. Unfortunately, success had slowly created a dangerous blind spot. She had begun judging people by appearances. As Victoria stepped from her private elevator that morning, her eyes immediately landed on Grayson's weathered pickup truck parked near the executive entrance. Her expression hardened. To her, the truck looked like an inconvenience. An embarrassment. Something that didn't belong. Without asking questions, she instructed security to remove it immediately. Within minutes, a tow truck arrived. Grayson watched from inside the building lobby as his vehicle was hooked up and pulled away. He didn't protest. He didn't argue. He simply observed in silence. Then he sat down and waited for his scheduled meeting. Meanwhile, Victoria continued her morning routine, completely unaware of the storm she had just created. At 10 o'clock, the board meeting began. The directors gathered around a long polished table overlooking the city skyline. Several members appeared unusually excited. They had spent months trying to secure Grayson's visit. Some considered him the last realistic chance to save several failing divisions. Victoria entered confidently and took her seat. Then the chairman smiled and announced that their special guest had arrived. The boardroom doors opened. Grayson walked inside. For a moment, Victoria barely looked up from her notes. Then she noticed the worn boots, the faded shirt, the weathered face. Confusion crossed her expression. This was the expert everyone had been praising? The chairman warmly introduced Grayson and began listing his accomplishments. The room grew quiet. Victoria's confidence slowly disappeared. The patents, the industrial breakthroughs, the consulting projects, the massive financial successes, the manufacturing innovations. Each achievement sounded bigger than the last. By the time the introduction ended, even Victoria looked stunned. Yet the real shock came moments later. One board member projected a report onto the screen. The report showed detailed estimates indicating that Grayson's recommendations could potentially save the company nearly $400 million over the next 3 years. The room erupted with interest. Directors leaned forward. Executives began taking notes. For the first time that morning, Victoria realized the importance of the man sitting across from her. Then Grayson quietly spoke. He explained that before the meeting began, he needed to address a concern. His voice remained calm, professional, respectful. He explained that his vehicle had been towed from company property less than an hour earlier. The room instantly fell silent. Several board members exchanged worried looks. The chairman's expression darkened. Questions quickly followed. Who ordered it? Why? What happened? The answers arrived faster than anyone expected. Security logs confirmed everything. Victoria had personally authorized the removal. Without asking questions. Without verifying identities. Without understanding the situation. The board members looked horrified. Not because of the truck itself, but because the incident perfectly reflected the leadership problems they had been quietly discussing for months. The company had become increasingly disconnected from employees, customers, and practical realities. Executives focused on appearances while operational problems worsened. And now, in a single moment, the CEO had demonstrated exactly that mindset. Grayson never raised his voice. Never criticized anyone. Never demanded an apology. His calmness somehow made the situation even more uncomfortable. He simply explained that respect mattered. Not because of money. Not because of titles. But because every person deserved basic dignity. Then he stood up. He thanked everyone for their time. And he prepared to leave. Panic spread across the boardroom. Several directors immediately stood. The chairman practically rushed around the table. One executive after another urged Grayson to stay. They apologized. They asked for another chance. They explained how important his expertise was. For the first time in years, Victoria watched powerful people plead with someone they had initially dismissed. And she realized she had made a terrible mistake. Not because she risked losing a valuable consultant, but because she had forgotten something fundamental about leadership. She had stopped seeing people. She only saw status. She only saw appearances. She only saw assumptions. As Grayson reached the doorway, Victoria finally stood. The room became silent again. Everyone waited. For several seconds, she struggled to find words. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of defending herself, she accepted responsibility. She admitted her mistake completely. She acknowledged her poor judgment. She apologized directly. Not as a CEO. Not as an executive. But as one human being speaking honestly to another. The sincerity surprised everyone. Especially Grayson. For a long moment, neither person spoke. Then Grayson slowly returned to his seat. The relief across the room was almost visible. Over the next 3 hours, Grayson carefully analyzed the company's operations. He identified inefficiencies nobody else had noticed. He proposed practical solutions. He outlined realistic improvements. Every recommendation was supported by data, experience, and common sense. The board listened attentively. By the end of the presentation, many executives appeared amazed. The company's future suddenly looked brighter. But the most important transformation wasn't happening in spreadsheets or financial reports. It was happening inside Victoria. For the first time in years, she genuinely listened. She asked questions. She learned. She reflected. Later that afternoon, after the meeting concluded, she personally drove Grayson to retrieve his truck. The old pickup sat exactly where the towing company had left it. Under the afternoon sunlight, it looked no different than before. Yet Victoria viewed it differently now. The vehicle represented perseverance. Sacrifice. Hard work. The journey of a father who had survived unimaginable loss while raising a daughter alone. Several weeks later, Titan Dynamics began implementing Grayson's recommendations. Results appeared almost immediately. Costs dropped. Efficiency improved. Employee morale increased. The company gradually returned to profitability. The board publicly credited Grayson's contributions. But Grayson cared far less about recognition than he did about getting home each evening to Piper. Months later, Victoria visited a community event sponsored by the company. There she saw Grayson helping children build simple mechanical projects. Piper stood beside him, smiling proudly. The sight moved her deeply. For all his success, wealth, and expertise, Grayson remained grounded. His greatest achievement wasn't business. It was the daughter he was raising. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, share it with family and friends, and subscribe to Single Dad Empire. Stories like these remind us that true character can never be measured by appearances. Special request: comment below with the words, "Respect everyone," if you believe every person deserves dignity regardless of how they look, what they drive, or how much money they have. As the sun began setting that evening, Grayson drove home in the same old truck that had nearly cost $1 billion company its future. Nothing about the vehicle had changed. The paint was still faded. The engine still rattled. The seats were still worn. But the people who had judged it had changed. And sometimes that makes all the difference. Because the most valuable people in the world rarely announce themselves. They don't always wear expensive suits. They don't always arrive in luxury cars. They don't always look successful. Sometimes they arrive in old pickup trucks carrying years of sacrifice, wisdom, and quiet strength. And when we learn to see beyond appearances, we often discover that the person we were ready to dismiss may be exactly the person we need most. That day, a CEO learned humility. A board learned respect. And a single father reminded everyone that true worth has never been determined by what someone drives, but by the character they carry inside. The old truck disappeared down the road toward home, carrying a father eager to spend another evening with his daughter. And in the end, that mattered more than any boardroom victory ever could.